In the Fifth Era, on September 9th, 1349, the end of the world began in the city of Tingen. There was a woman screaming, and it looked like a terrifying monster had burst out of her. Someone tried to fight the monster to defeat it, but unfortunately, the monster killed him and threw him to the ground. Then the monster exploded, which triggered the end of the world. But suddenly, another person appeared, flying through the air, while strange things started happening to him. It seemed that the person who had been fighting the monster had been reincarnated into someone else's body and went back in time to June 28th, 1349. This person had a wound on his head that suddenly started to heal. We learned that his name was Klein when a ghost called him by it, and Klein realized he was alive again. The scene shifts to the house of two people who were killed. Detectives arrived to investigate, and the investigator said these two were Leash and Naya, and they died either by suicide or while practicing black magic, having been sacrificed, which awakened an evil force. Leash and Naya were connected to Klein. We see Klein getting dressed and reading Klein's own diary. It turned out that Klein was an expert in charms and magic. Leash had brought Klein a notebook from the Fourth Era, and they had managed to decode part of it. Klein started reading all the strange incidents recorded there, wondering if any of it was true. What caught his attention was that the notes for June 27th were missing. Then suddenly a note appeared saying that on a certain date the world would end and everyone would die. This shocked Klein, but he dropped everything when he heard his sister's voice after she woke up, trying to hide everything so he wouldn't shock her. Only the gun on the desk was still visible, but Klein managed to hide it just in time. But his sister, Melissa, noticed that something was up and heard the sound of the gun he was trying to hide. When she asked him about the noise, Klein said it was the clock, which had stopped again. His sister gave him a disapproving look and fixed the clock, handing it to him before walking out, which made him feel stupid. After that, Klein noticed his head wound had fully healed and thought maybe reincarnation had given him some healing power. He started wondering if what had happened to Klein was suicide or murder, since his recollections were still unclear, but he was sure there were a lot of weird things that had happened, and would continue to happen because of the notebook. Then he remembered he'd always been unlucky, usually a failure most of the time. That was why he'd used a charm for luck before going to sleep. But his thoughts were interrupted by his sister bringing him breakfast, telling him to rest in bed if he was feeling muddled, as she'd noticed he looked tired. She asked him to get some fresh bread, and not to leave his breakfast out too long or it would spoil quickly in the heat. She also said she'd bring him some meat today, although she'd be a little late, and that the meat was a reward for Klein, since he'd been working hard to find a job recently. Klein was touched by his sister's words and said goodbye as she left for school. Klein thought maybe his sister wouldn't find him when she got home, because he'd decided to leave the house so as not to put her in danger. He hoped things would go well, then went to get her the bread as she'd asked. The shopkeeper greeted Klein and congratulated him on graduating, saying he was a special person and would find a great job soon. Klein noticed someone watching him from outside the bakery. He took the bread, thanked the lady, and left, walking through the city's streets, taking everything in and feeling like he was in a parallel world compared to his previous life. As he walked, he heard people playing poker and was surprised they had games like the ones he used to play. He continued and started thinking about what had happened to him and where he was now. At that moment, he dropped a coin, and as he bent down to pick it up, he sensed someone approaching and instinctively readied his gun, but it turned out to be a clown inviting him to the circus. Klein declined and walked away, but noticed people following him, so he sped up to avoid them. He ducked into a tent to hide and check the situation, only to find out it was a fortune teller's tent. She invited him to sit so she could predict his future. Meanwhile, the first person who'd been watching Klein headed toward him, but then saw someone else and left quickly, moving away from Klein. During this, the fortune teller insisted Klein sit down to have his fortune told for free, since he was her first customer. Klein sat down and asked if the card reading was free too. The fortune teller seemed nervous, but said it was. Klein knew nothing was really free in this world as she shuffled the cards. She asked what he wanted to know, and he said he wanted to know about his past, present, and future. The fortune teller drew 3 cards, placing them before Klein, saying the first was for his past, the second for his present, and the third for his future, and asked which card he wanted to flip over first. The card turned out to be the Fool, which is the start of the card sequence and symbolizes a new beginning. At that moment, the real fortune teller arrived, revealing that the current one was a fake. The man who had been tailing Klein tried to enter the tent, but Klein noticed and quickly left. Afterwards, Klein went home to prepare to perform a charm, setting everything up in its proper place, standing in the center of the room and beginning the ritual. The papers started floating around him as he chanted, but when he finished, nothing happened and he was shocked. Suddenly, Klein felt a headache and heard a voice saying, "Don't look for trouble." Then strange things started happening, and it seemed the spell had worked after all. A red bubble appeared around Klein, who was screaming from the pain. Suddenly, he found himself floating in a weird place, surrounded by strange red and blue spots. These spots started swirling around him, and suddenly the scene shifted to a strange woman chanting a spell in the name of the Hall family. And we also see a strange man holding a bottle and casting a spell, shocked by something he felt. Then we see that the girl who was performing the ritual teleported into the place where Klein was, along with the man too. It seemed the red spots belonged to the girl and the blue spots to the man. The girl asked Klein where they were, but Klein was shocked and didn't understand what was going on. He even thought he had summoned the man and the girl using his spell. The girl then asked him if he was the owner of this world. After she said that, Klein thought about it, and suddenly a real world formed around them. Klein realized that anything he thought about or they said would happen actually happened, so he tried to use the gray fog, and sure enough, it worked. Klein thought, maybe I really am the master of this world. The man asked, "Who are you, sir? Where are we?" Klein started wondering if he really was Klein or actually Joe Mingrui. He went over, sat on the ruler's chair, and the world finished constructing itself. Then Klein told the man and woman, "You can call me the Fool." The man replied, "Sir Fool, who are you and what will you do now? Because this is considered an attack." The girl then asked, "Have you finished what you set out to do? Can we go home now?" Klein said, "Of course. If you want to and ask me, I'll send you home now." Meanwhile, Klein was trying to figure out who the man and woman were because he couldn't see them clearly. He thought the girl looked like a naive teenager, while the man seemed mature and cautious. The girl was happy, saying she had always dreamed of going on an adventure like this, and asked what she should do to become a Beyonder. Let me tell you what Beyonders are. Beyonders are people who can obtain different supernatural abilities. There are 22 different abilities on the Beyonder tree by drinking special potions we'll learn about later, and climbing the Beyonder ladder, which has 9 sequences. The lower the sequence number, the stronger the person. So sequence 9 is the lowest rank, and sequence 1 is the highest. Back to Klein, who didn't know what Beyonders meant and had never heard the term before. So the fool used his wits and told the girl, "Why don't you let the other person answer your question?" The other person was surprised the fool knew he had the answer and told the girl, "You're from Lowen City, and if you want to become a Beyonder, you first need to go and join the Church of the Evernight Goddess, or some other church. Although some people can never become Beyonders as they don't have the aptitude, Beyonders are real, and they fight the dangers hidden in the dark." The girl said she wanted to become a Beyonder without losing her freedom, as would happen if she joined the church. He suggested she join the royal family or a noble family, but she couldn't do that either, so she asked if there was another way. The man said, "Actually, there is, and I can help you. I have 2 sequence 9 Beyonder potions. One is called Seafarer, the other Audience," and he explained what each one did. At that moment, the fool was thinking if summoning these people and using the gray fog meant he was already a Beyonder. Meanwhile, the girl told the fool that she had made a deal with the man and wanted him to witness it, but she asked him to accept other meetings, which shocked the fool because he didn't understand either. Then the man told him, "Sir, you have power beyond our imagination, and we appreciate you choosing us. So, let us handle the trivial matters that you don't have time to deal with." The fool was thinking that if he kept meeting with these people, many of his secrets would be revealed, but dealing with this mysterious world might help him get back home. So, he said he agreed to the meeting and set a fixed time, every Monday at 3 p.m. The girl was happy and suggested that she and the man also use pseudonyms because they couldn't use their real names, and she suggested, since their master used a pseudonym from tarot cards, she decided to use a name too, and her name was Justice, and the man named himself the Hanged Man. Meanwhile, there were people knocking on Klein's door in the real world, which made him lose focus, and the mysterious world started to collapse. But he took control of the situation and got things back on track. Then he said that the meeting was ending now, and each of them returned to their real world. And when Klein woke up, he knew it was the police knocking, so he hid the gun and went to open the door. He was shocked that the person knocking was a detective, and when he opened the door, he was shocked that the detective was the person who had been following him as he walked in the city. Then Klein told him, "You were the one following me." The detective smiled and said, "Let's just say I was protecting you." Then the 2 detectives entered Klein's house, and it seemed they also had powers and were considered transcendents, but we'll find that out during the viewing. The important thing is that Klein was shocked when he heard the news about Naya and Lish, and that they had committed suicide. He couldn't believe it. The detective told him that at first glance, the scene indicated suicide, and the detective asked if Klein had seen anything strange. Meanwhile, the other detective was reading Klein's journal and read a sentence that everyone would die and asked Klein, who was shocked and didn't know what to say. Then he sat on the bed and said he didn't remember anything. The detective told him, "Forget about that. There's evidence you visited Mr. McGovern's house on the 27th. Klein told him, "Maybe you won't believe me, but I don't remember anything except what's in my journal." The detective told him, "The important thing is that Mr. McGovern lost a gun, and I'm sure we'll find it here. earlier, so Klein showed them where the gun was and said that he woke up yesterday and found the gun next to him, and he had been unconscious and in a position indicating he was trying to commit suicide. And since these events, I've lost a lot of my memories. The detective said that what Klein was saying matched their conclusions. But even if they were sure Klein was honest, they had to use their methods to confirm, so they would send Klein to a psychic medium to search his memories and verify his story. Then the other detective said that generally, they were happy Klein was alive and well, because in incidents and crimes like these, all parties are usually dead. Then the detectives left, taking Klein with them, who was terrified and afraid they would discover he was from another world. But his thoughts were interrupted by a child running away after stealing bread from a bakery, and the baker was chasing him. Then the detective caught the boy, but the boy tried to escape and dropped a piece of wood on the horse of the detective's carriage, which made things tense around them. Klein then took the opportunity and started to run away until he reached a distant place and started walking, tired. Meanwhile, water was about to fall on him, but suddenly time stopped. Klein understood that there was a transcendent nearby and tried to escape. He thought he had escaped when he got into a carriage and asked its driver to move immediately, and when he was sure he was away from the detectives, he asked the carriage driver to stop, but he didn't stop, and it turned out the carriage driver was one of the detectives. Suddenly, Klein woke up from his sleep and thought he was dreaming, but the detective appeared before him again and introduced himself as Nighthawk Dan Smith. Klein was shocked by this person's ability to manipulate his dreams. Dan told him that they were very strong at night. Klein didn't understand why Dan spoke in the plural, and suddenly, the world around them started moving strangely. Then a girl appeared from behind Klein and choked him and asked him to relax, and that she would be gentle with him. Then Klein lost consciousness, and when he woke up, he found himself in a strange place. Then he saw his father and mother, but the girl interrupted him. Klein understood that this girl was the psychic medium and saw his memories. Then the medium appeared and took hold of Klein and asked him about the Antigonus family notebook, but he didn't remember. Then she asked him what he was doing on the day Lish and Naya were killed, so he took out his gun and committed suicide. At that point, he woke up and found the medium telling Dan that Klein was telling the truth. As for the lost memories, they disappeared like the souls of Lish and Naya, and she couldn't track them. She also said she had never seen anything like it before, and asked Dan to be careful because the matter was serious. Then Dan said that since the notebook was still missing, it meant Klein was still in danger, and they weren't his guards and couldn't protect him. Then Dan offered Klein to join them and become one of the Transcendents, which shocked Klein. The next day, we see Klein walking down the street holding a card for a bar in the city, recalling what Dan told him. If you want to join us, go to a guy named Right at the Hound Bar. Klein thought joining Dan's special squad, the Nighthawks, would be a good cover for him. So, he headed to the bar, and when he got there, he found the place chaotic, full of bets on animals and fights between rough-looking men guys. Klein looked nothing like, and they saw him as just a baby. One of the men almost started a fight with Klein, but he managed to avoid it. He went to talk to Wright, who was angry and asked who sent him there. When Klein said Dan sent him, Wright told him to follow. Wright then put Klein in an elevator and sent him to a strange place called Blackthorn Company. Klein then went to the receptionist, Roseanne, who was asleep at her desk. When she woke up, she said she'd been expecting Klein and told him to follow her. We see the detective there too. Klein and Roseanne started down some stairs and met a quiet girl named Royale, then kept going. As they walked, Roseanne showed Klein around the place. They saw a strange person called Fry doing experiments on humans and another man walking alone named Kinley. When they reached the captain's office, Roseanne asked Klein to go in alone because, although the captain is nice, she's scared of him. Klein went in alone and came to a huge door. Inside, he found Dan waiting. Dan gave him the squad joining document and explained the terms for joining the 7th unit, but Klein was surprised by their headquarters. Dan told him this place was just a cover. There were many like it, since their squad dealt with supernatural matters. Dan welcomed Klein, who was happy to join, but Dan warned him he might lose control of himself. He then told Klein to take a candle and follow him. Klein was shocked by this. They entered a room full of graves. Dan said these graves belonged to Nighthawks who lost control, and they honored their memory there. Then Klein and Dan talked about the divisions and their structure. Dan explained the church offered 4 potion paths: the path of complete insomnia, the corpse collector path, the mysterious intruder path, and the seer path. Klein could choose any path, but he needed to think carefully and see the alchemist, Neil, who would help him make a good decision. Klein thanked the captain and started to leave, thinking about which path to choose. He was very hesitant. He found the alchemist's room, and when he opened the door, it was empty, but suddenly an explosion happened, and the alchemist appeared. Klein introduced himself, and Neil said he knew about Klein since Dan had told him everything. Neil advised him to take his time choosing a path, then asked Klein to help tidy up the room, which Klein did right away. Neil spoke with Klein about his life, studies, and experience, but Klein acted humbly. Neil told him to start by learning simple things and master them, then he could handle tough things and decode secrets. Neil then took out a notebook belonging to Emperor Roselle, which shocked Klein because most of these journals had disappeared. Neil said that, for 150 years, no one had been able to crack these journals, and legend said whoever could would gain supernatural power. Neil said he'd managed to crack some codes and showed them to Klein, but Klein was shocked to discover they were written in Chinese's mother tongue in his previous life so he could read them easily. He started thinking about the king's life, reading all the secrets, and reacting in his mind, learning a lot from the information. Neil didn't understand why Klein seemed distracted. When Klein tried to say he could crack some of the code, Neil burst out laughing and said Klein had the energy of youth and thought he could do anything, but things were much harder than they seemed. Of course, Klein didn't tell Neil he understood the writing because he was from another world. Klein then decided to take the seer path, like his ancestors in the king's journals. Neil was surprised by this choice and told Klein that once he drank the potion and took this path, there was no turning back. Klein said he was confident in his decision. Neil replied, "Since you've chosen your path, let's start the ritual right now," brought out his tools, and started making the potion. Its ingredients were really strange, and when he finished, it even caused a funny explosion. Neil was shocked by its look and smell, and even doubted if it was drinkable. Neil started joking with Klein, making him a bit embarrassed. But then, Neil told Klein to drink it without hesitation, or it would turn out badly for him. Klein looked at the potion, made his decision, drank it quickly, and felt it start working in his veins. He felt strange sensations. Neil told him that the potion was kicking in, and he should imagine something that exists in this world. Klein succeeded in this. Then Neil asked him to imagine something that didn't exist in this world. As Klein tried this, strange things happened: explosions, the weather changing. Neil kept telling him to hold it together and control himself. Klein kept imagining a rocket from his former life, which was the cause of all this. Neil tried to help as much as possible, and eventually Klein imagined the rocket, standing on it while it flew. Then Klein got lost in thought, finally imagining a spacesuit, causing the whole area around them to collapse. Neil tried to calm things down, and at the end, Klein managed to succeed in the test. This eye color changed, and he became a real seer. Neil congratulated him on his success and said he was a promising young man. Klein could now see Neil's spirit. Neil told him he could now see people's spirits and know everything about them, like their health status, for example. But Klein was shocked when he saw two huge eyes above Neil. Neil told him not to worry, maybe it was just a weather effect, but Klein saw someone fading away in the background. After all that happened, Klein felt exhausted, and Neil advised him not to overuse his power because it would exhaust his spirit and could lead him to hallucinate. He told Klein that Leonard, in the beginning, used his power too much and collapsed on the stairs, so Klein should be careful. Neil showed Klein how to turn his power on and off, telling him to tap twice between his eyebrows. When Klein did this, it worked. His power stopped and his eyes went back to normal. Neil gave Klein some more advice on using his powers differently and told him that was enough for today. But before Klein left, he needed to collect his issued equipment, a handgun and special bullets for killing demons. Neil told him to ask Dan about compensation. Klein was happy about all this. Klein then went to Dan, who gave him advice and told him that with power and distinction comes risk, so he needs to manage things well and not get involved in matters that don't concern him. Dan told him his salary was £3 a week and gave him a whole month's pay in advance, £12. Klein was so happy, telling himself he'd finally overcome poverty. After that, we see Klein bought a staff and new clothes and started wandering around the city. While he was walking, a carriage suddenly stopped beside him, and the person inside ordered him to get in. It turned out the person in the carriage was Leonard. He gave Klein a picture of a boy named Elliot, son of a famous merchant. This boy was kidnapped this morning, and they had to investigate the matter. This made Klein wonder and say that they were only responsible for the Beyonders. He told him they were now undercover at the security company, and the child's father was a regular client of this company. Leonard told him not to worry, it would be easy for a diviner. Then he gave Klein the child's clothes to track him, and indeed, Klein began using his power, and Leonard was impressed that Klein had bought the divining staffs. When Klein's power activated, the moon turned red, and Klein's power began to spread through the divining staffs. Klein could see everything the child had done, but the strange thing was that the eyes Klein had seen before were visible, following Klein every step the child took. Then he started directing the carriage left and right to the child's location until they reached a strange house on Forston Street. When they entered the house, It looked abandoned. Then they went upstairs, and the staffs guided them exactly to the child's location. Then Klein used his eye power and saw the kidnappers and the child. Leonard praised him then, saying, "Well done, this will be over now." But Klein looked tired again and wondered to himself if he was overusing his power. Then Leonard went into the room and broke in with his power. The two kidnappers tried to kill Leonard, but he dodged the bullet and took down the first kidnapper in a flash. Then he started beating the second kidnapper until he also took him down. Meanwhile, a strange feather appeared, and Klein and Leonard felt a dark power. Because of this, Klein stepped back. Indeed, the two kidnappers turned into a strange monster, but Leonard was excited, and the battle began. Leonard wasn't attacking, and the monster couldn't touch Leonard until the monster decided to escape, but Klein noticed him and started following cautiously so they wouldn't be ambushed, until the monster appeared next to Klein, who fired his gun while trembling. Then the monster flew into the sky, then suddenly fell because of Leonard's power, and Leonard appeared in his world, binding the monster with his power, then finally took it down. Everyone was happy to save the child, but suddenly Klein felt something strange and saw the eyes again. When Leonard asked him what was wrong, he said, "Nothing." After Leonard left, Klein told himself that the real Klein had visited this place before. After that, they handed the child over to his father, and Leonard began investigating, wondering where these kidnappers got the Beyonder potion that turned them into an uncontrollable monster. Leonard was joking with Klein, telling him he was lucky because it's rare for novices to encounter a monster like this. Then Leonard said, "Anyway, I'm happy to work with you," and extended his hand to shake, which surprised Klein, but he shook it. Then Leonard told Klein that something was drawing him to him, and Klein told him, "Me too." After Klein left, we see Leonard talking to someone in the shadows. Then we see Klein going home, very happy because he was going to tell his sister he got a job. When he arrived home and tried to open the door, he found the place had changed, which shocked him, and he felt there was an intruder nearby and tried to escape. Then he saw a door and went to it. When he entered, he found Klein's notebook, and its pages were flipping rapidly until it stopped on the page that read, "Everyone will die, including me." And suddenly, the fool's paper appeared and changed the entire place. Then Klein woke up startled. He thought to himself and said he felt that the house opposite the kidnapping site contained evidence related to the Antigonus family's diary. After that, we see someone wandering around the city until he reached the intended address. When he arrived at the house, the door opened by itself, and it turned out to be Klein's house. And it seemed this person was Klein's brother, named Benson. He couldn't believe they would live in a house like this, which made him emotional and cry. Then they sat at the dining table, and Klein was the one preparing the food this time. Klein's sister and brother were surprised by the delicious smell of the food, so much so that his sister asked him if it was truly the first time Klein had cooked. When Klein's sister tasted the food, she was amazed by it. Then Benson gave Klein a gift, which was a luxurious suit, making Klein say that this gift was expensive. His sister told him that Benson had been saving money for it for a while. When Klein put on the suit, they were impressed by it because it fit him well. Klein was happy and thanked his sister and brother. Then he remembered his parents for a moment, and his brother told him that they were family and there was no need to thank them, and they were all happy. After that, we see the person who was watching Klein being tortured by Dan. He managed to find out the location of the Antigonus family diaries, and from the seal on his neck, they knew he belonged to the Secret Order, the group responsible for leaking the Antigonus family diaries. Leonard then said it's no surprise this person was watching Klein, and if the Order wants something, they won't let it go easily. So Dan decided they needed to find the diaries as fast as possible before the Secret Order does. Then Dan's assistant came and told him Klein found evidence related to the diary. We see Klein going to a place where his princes were dead, and he couldn't handle it, but Commander Dan helped him. Leonard found a message saying, "You have come here and taken the diary," but while searching, they didn't find the diary. They also learned that the son of the deceased had disappeared, so Leonard took a picture of that person and gave it to Klein, who used his staff and power to locate him. When Klein started using his power, the staff began moving strangely and almost hit him, but Dan stopped it, saying some powerful force was involved to prevent them from finding Piper, the son. So Dan decided to ask the Knights Templar for help, because they have many ways to find someone. After that, they moved to a strange place and were given the Topaz Pendulum, a tool that amplifies communication among spirits, which would help Klein a lot in his mission today. We learned the Knights Templar allowed the use of a dangerous Grade 2 tool to help find Piper, and this tool was brought to the city of Tingen. It's an antique sealed item, rare and used only by the Transcendents. Some of these items have mysterious powers, some have destructive powers. That's why they are kept behind special barriers in different places. By the way, Grade 2 means it's a dangerous tool. Then the team members arrived with the tool. Dan introduced Klein to the other Nighthawks members. First Harson, nicknamed Nightmare from the 7th sequence, then Borgia, the Gravedigger from the 8th sequence, and finally Dali, the Spirit Mediator from the 7th sequence, who welcomed Klein. But Harson objected to Klein joining the mission because it was dangerous and Klein's offensive power was 0. What worried Dan more was the antique tool, and when he found out they would use it in the mission, he opposed it because it was a big risk. But Harson said they were searching for Piper, and there was a rumor he was from the Antigonus family. If that rumor was true, they could only find him using a tool made by that family. Harson then ordered everyone to act as he did to activate the tool without putting anyone at risk. Klein felt burned by how the tool was activated and didn't understand what was happening. When Harson uncovered the tool, it was inside a box, and it started moving, surprising Klein. When the box opened, a small mummy in the shape of a clown came out. Klein said it was a cute doll, but things quickly changed. The other side of the doll appeared, and it controlled Klein and almost choked him until Leonard intervened. Klein started running away, scared of the doll. Dan told him it seemed to follow him because he had proof related to the Antigonus family diary. The doll reacts to everything connected to that family. We then learn the doll can control 2 or 3 people close to it, but can be freed by a strong slap, like Leonard did. Klein kept trying to escape while the doll pursued him. Suddenly, the doll got very angry and started raging when it saw Piper's coat. Harson confirmed Piper was from the Antigonus family and ordered them to start tracking him immediately. The Nighthawks team were roaming the city, moving with the antique tool, and Klein felt embarrassed, but Leonard woke him up telling him he could stop now. The team then rode carts to search. The scene changes to a strange person using dark magic to perform a ritual, using Piper and the diaries, with Piper being the sacrifice. Then a strange figure with a clown-like face says he arrived late and the diaries were absorbed, but he heard the sound of Nighthawks' carts and thought it was a chance to turn the tide. When the Nighthawks arrived where Piper was, Klein doubted the doll's power, but Dan interrupted and told him to focus on his task. Klein used the pendulum and said something very dangerous was in the warehouse. The doors opened, and a red wind covered the place, frightening the horses. It seemed Piper had turned into a violent beast. The Nighthawks prepared to take down Piper, who had gone wild after seeing the antique tool. Dan told Klein to take care of himself and not intervene, and the others started attacking Piper. They all coordinated their attack, surrounding Piper from all sides, and were close to defeating him. But suddenly there was an explosion that changed everything, and Piper regained control of himself. Dan realized they weren't facing a normal beast, but a walking corpse. The Nighthawks kept attacking, and Dali tried to find the beast's weak point. Dan was amazed by the beast's power, and said their attacks were becoming limited because Piper was merging with the diary. Dali said she found a weak spot and asked everyone to control the beast for 3 seconds. The team did that while Dan and the others launched very strong, crazy attacks until they managed to restrain the beast. But then everything flipped when Klein felt something strange. The diary inside Piper's body lit up red, and suddenly a destructive blast exploded, seriously injuring Dan and Leonard. Harson tried to contain the attack, but it turned out the tool was the target. Harson attacked again, hitting the beast with his sword, but the attack wasn't enough. The beast countered and threw Harson away. Dan struggled to handle things with his serious injuries. At that moment, Klein stepped in and used a tool to hypnotize the beast, managing to succeed. Dali took the chance to execute the final attack and finally defeated the beast completely. After that, Dan worried about Dali and went to check on her, giving her treatment. Meanwhile, Klein heard a strange sound and followed it to find a strange diary. Then the clown-faced person appeared, tried to attack Klein, but Dan attacked him, revealing he was using a shadow clone. The person started to flee. The Nighthawks' goal was to secure the diary and the antique tool, and they began trying to catch this person. Klein remembered he was the same person he saw earlier at the circus. The battle between Harrison and the clown was very intense, but Harrison couldn't hit him. Even Leonard intervened, and the clown launched an explosive attack from his face. None of the Nighthawks could hit him, and Klein was puzzled by this. He analyzed the clown's movements, came up with an idea, and actually succeeded in hitting him. The clown decided to unleash his power and attempted to attack Klein, but all the Nighthawks rushed to protect him. They soon discovered that the attacker was a copy, while the real person was standing far away, targeting the artifact. He succeeded in his plan, hitting it, which caused the bag to open and the doll to emerge again, taking control of the area. This time, the doll controlled everyone present. Klein was desperately trying to save himself and began to think about using a fog spell to transport him back to his world. He started chanting until he succeeded and figured that the doll's power had increased because of the note. The goal of the person with the clown's face from the beginning was to release this doll to bring them all under his control. He thought that if he stayed too long in this world, his friends would be harmed, so he decided to use the pendulum to create create a spell and return safely to his friends. When he returned, he found the clown talking to him, wanting to make a deal. Klein would hand over the Antigonus family notes, and the clown would release him and his friends. He said, "Believe me, I'll give you a gift, a method to elevate you to the 8th tier." Klein was wondering if what he was saying was true or a lie, and he hesitated, not understanding what was happening. The clown tried to deceive Klein, telling him that all his friends were asleep, and that what happened would remain a secret among them. But Leonard was aware of the situation and wanted a quick response from Klein, because their time was running out. Then the clown shocked Klein with a word, which we didn't hear, and he used a strange weapon, almost touching Klein with it. However, Klein grabbed the weapon, shocking the clown, and Klein seized the opportunity to strike back. Then we see that the doll's influence hadn't ended, and it took control of the clown, allowing Klein to take advantage of the moment and finish him off with 2 shots to the neck and head. It turned out that this clown was part of a secret organization. Suddenly, the clown stood up again and said the name Hornesis before dying. After that, the battle ended, and they regained control of the artifact. Everyone started checking on each other, and then Leonard went to Klein, saying he wanted to save him, but Klein ended up saving everyone. Leonard then whispered to him that he was aware of what was happening, which made Klein call him narcissistic. After that, they returned the ancient weapon to its place, and the mission successfully concluded. Dan told Klein that he knew Klein was curious about what was in the note, but the Knights Templar had to verify it first before letting Klein see its contents. Dan started praising Klein, telling him that his performance was exceptional, and that he had saved everyone while thwarting the secret organization's plan. He told him that he would inform the Knights Templar of his excellence, and that Klein would soon become a permanent employee. Klein was surprised that the person who did all this knew that the note would generate dangerous power, so why didn't he do it away from Tenjin? Dan explained that people with evil plans often make wrong decisions. Klein then looked at the clown's corpse, shocked that he had killed someone. Dan reassured him, saying the killing was necessary to save many lives. Here, Klein recalled what the clown said before dying, that the 8th tier corresponding to the seer was the clown. After that, he met the rest of the Nighthawks to say goodbye, and Harrison began to acknowledge Klein's strength, saying, "You're the first person from the 9th tier to defeat someone from the 7th tier. Your performance was truly amazing." Klein justified that it was just luck, but Leonard began analyzing the situation, which annoyed Klein, claiming it was merely luck. In the end, Harrison said Klein was the most skilled seer he had ever met, and that a bright future awaited him, which embarrassed Klein. Klein was experiencing strange things, prompting Dan to ask him to rest. Klein began thinking about everything that had happened, and decided it was time to go to the university and visit his teacher. Then we transition to the university, where Klein is talking to his history teacher, Eggers, asking about Hornesis. Klein started recounting everything that happened to him regarding the Antigonus family note and the Hornesis Mountains. The teacher told him he had heard something similar before, which excited Klein, but then the teacher discouraged him, suggesting it might just be a similarity of word roots. Klein asked the teacher to keep in touch if he found any information on these matters, and the teacher agreed. When Klein was about to leave, the teacher thanked him for his gift, and Klein replied that he was the one who should thank him for years of teaching. The teacher advised him to be cautious in his work, as there were forbidden areas Klein should not venture into to avoid misfortune. Klein promised he would take that advice to heart. After Klein left, the teacher began to think about the conversation, and a tattoo appeared behind his ear, but it wasn't clear. Then a strange power emerged from the teacher's shadow, suggesting he was one of the transcendent beings, which Klein was unaware of. On a dark night, there was a mysterious man torturing his servant for failing to retrieve and decode the Antigonids' family ledger. The servant had disappointed his master from the Aurora group and was about to face death because of this humiliation. Desperately, the servant pleaded for his life, explaining that the ledger, whenever they took it, appeared ordinary due to protective magic, which is why several people had been used as sacrifices to decode it, but they all perished, and the code fell into the hands of the Nighthawks team. Because of this, his master decided to cut out the servant's tongue and was about to end his life. The servant begged that one of the sacrificed, Clean, was still alive and could help them provide what Aurora needed. His master gave him a last chance and let him live, returning to work. Knowing that failure meant being torn apart before he could say a word, Clean made his way to the Nighthawk headquarters, where an old man named Neil taught him ritual magic to enhance his abilities as a seer. Neil warned that someone of Clean's low level would need external help to perform the ritual safely, and should never seek assistance from the dark lest he be drawn into the abyss. Clean watched Neil prepare for the ritual while wondering if the luck-changing ritual was black magic. Neil set up magical boundaries and lit candles with spiritual energy, beginning to chant. Cleen awaited something epic, but his mouth dropped open when the old man asked for help repaying his 30 bet. After Cleen confronted him about this dull request, Neil laughed and took him outside to demonstrate the power of magic. They found a wallet on the ground belonging to a wealthy person. Cleen suspected Neil's intentions, but Neil assured him that ritual magic had always been pure, and there was nothing shady about stealing from a noble. A carriage arrived with the wallet's owner, causing Cleen to wonder how Neil would handle it. However, Neil returned the wallet to its owner and received a 30 pounds reward, shocking Cleen once more. Neil began a lecture with Cleen about trusting magic, explaining that it can be in anything as long as no one is harmed. After that, Cleen thought about Emperor Russell's diaries on how to become a good transgressor by digesting the potion and behaving like the chosen transgressors, but his thoughts were interrupted by a girl named Angelica approaching him with a flyer for the local fortune-telling club. Cleen seized the opportunity, believing she would help him act as a seer. Inside, the fortune-teller Glaukos predicted Cleen's future, stating he wouldn't return to his destination anytime soon, but it was possible in the long run. This gave Cleen hope. When Glaukos began to cough severely, Cleen knocked on his forehead to see his aura and advised him to visit a doctor for an examination of his lungs and eyes. Glaukos asked if Cleen was a doctor, but Cleen revealed he was a seer. While they were signing up, Angelica recalled that their best fortune teller, Vincent, had predicted the emergence of a distinguished seer, piquing Cleen's curiosity, who mentioned he was late because Vincent was about to finish his lecture on vision. She then led him to Vincent's class, where Cleen watched from the doorway, noting that Vincent used white magic and didn't seem suspicious. As the class ended, Cleen noticed Vincent handing a girl a gift. When the girl ran past Cleen, he had a terrible feeling. Ignoring his instinct, he thought he had misjudged the situation and introduced himself to Vincent, sitting down to chat. Vincent read Cleen's fortunes and was shocked by his superior abilities, offering some helpful advice on how he could use family and social gatherings to achieve what he hoped for, leaving Cleen stunned and deep in thought. He got up to thank Vincent for the information provided, but was shocked by the session's price, and happy that Vincent made the session free this time. After taking his leave and returning home, Cleen began working to decode the mysterious advice Vincent had given him and how he could use it to return to his world. He mapped out all the possibilities of using the Grey Mist realm and its inhabitants to return home, and contemplated how he could start acting like a seer to make his dreams a reality. Finally, he decided to direct the ritual toward himself and happily planned to see if it would work. Suddenly, he heard a noise at his door, burned the paper he was drafting, and went to see who it was, only to find a turtle doll made by his sister Melissa, telling Cleen he had been working hard and it was good to relax from time to time, and this doll was meant to help him do that. However, Cleen accidentally offended Melissa when he told her she made a beautiful turtle, revealing that the doll was intended to resemble a human, not a turtle. He then realized it was time to get to work, and Melissa told him to relax when he could, inviting him to a birthday party for a friend on the following Sunday. Cleen remembered the words family and gathering mentioned by Vincent and seized the chance to attend the feast that weekend with his sister. Later, he summoned his own world again and called upon the Hanged Man and his companion, Justice, using his powers as a seer to see their truths. Cleen congratulated Audrey on her success in becoming a Watcher. He then noticed he could see the symbols unique to the three of them, representing their special transgressor class with their own auras. However, their symbols were confusing, having double meanings and being incomplete. He allowed the two to speak freely, and Miss Justice remembered she had 3 questions she wanted to ask them. The first was about the role of the Watcher, and the Hanged Man decided to explain how Watchers remain Watchers forever and have never been in the spotlight, always in the background, quietly observing, and must let go of control and focus on the meaning of the potion. He then went on to explain the key to embodying the potion. Cleen corrected him, mentioning how representation and digestion were the key, shocking the Hanged Man as he absorbed that information and thanked Cleen for the clarification. The girl then asked what would happen if an animal drank the potion, since she had unintentionally allowed her dog to drink some. The Hanged Man said if the dog didn't die immediately or turn into a monster, it likely became a transgressor animal. Finally, she cried out about her father's problems and issues of noble families, and how the Lian government was failing, so Cleen advised her to hold an open exam for all nobles and commoners to bring in skilled people to help strengthen and stabilize the state, surprising them and prompting them to begin thanking him. After that, he informed them that his free advice was a down payment on what he wanted, and when asked about their mission, Cleen told them he wanted them to gather Russell's secret diaries for him, shocking the Hanged Man at how Cleen knew all this information in the first place. Also, Cleen asked them to cast a spell to improve luck directed at him for Sunday, and they agreed to this. Then Miss Justice wanted to know the spell, and when Cleen told them, The Hanged Man was shocked because no one could know that spell. After hearing this spell, this led to them completely submitting to Clean and deciding to treat him with greater respect. Clean then ended the meeting and returned home, thinking that Sunday was his day off so he could deal with any unexpected events that might arise. From his window, he saw Benson and Melissa and wondered if he could act like a fortune teller to slowly reveal to his siblings that he had become a transgressor. After getting ready and happy days passed by peacefully, Sunday finally arrived, and the Morty family dressed in their smart clothes to head to Melissa's friend's party. When they arrived, Clean learned that the friend's sister's name was Selena, the girl he had seen in Vincent's class earlier, but she didn't recognize him, so much so that she was saying he was handsome, and her sister Elizabeth also worked at Vincent's headquarters. Suddenly, he heard the sound of the owl jar in his head conducting the ritual he had been tasked with, but he ignored it and entered the party, which was filled with lively energy. Clean blended in comfortably, and when he went to get some food, Elizabeth appeared and told him not to worry because Selena didn't know his identity as a seer yet. Shortly after, his sister showed up, making him anxious, and she expressed her hope that he would find a wife and a brother, but Elizabeth was still only 16, shocking him with her thinking. The girls then gathered in a room, and Selena held the magic wand Vincent had given her, telling her friends that Vincent designed it specifically so she could perform mirror magic. Clean watched as Selena recited a spell and activated the magic mirror. At that very moment, Clean felt a dangerous aura emanating from the upper room, and on the other side, Vincent was seen emanating an evil aura, saying, "It's time, Clean Morty. It's time for the sacrifice." Clean began to run. When he used his pendulum, he felt a terrible danger lurking nearby. When he arrived, he saw the three girls using the magic mirror to see when they would marry some handsome youths, and suddenly a wild girl appeared in the mirror, shocking Clean and making him realize that the situation was dangerous and that he wouldn't be able to contact his team in time. Clean noticed that it would be difficult to safely pull the girls away from the mirror, and time had already run out for Selena, who seemed afflicted by something. Then Clean remembered he could perform rituals like Neil taught him, and began searching for the supplies needed to perform the ritual, noticing that they were all in the room with the girls. He had to be quick before bodies began to fall. Unfortunately, because of the spell and the mirror, Selena put her friends to sleep, transforming into a monster and wanting to chase Clean, who tried to rush and perform the ritual. He gathered the tools and started chanting, almost succeeding in saving the situation. But Vincent used his power to give Selena some strength, and indeed, Selena stopped Clean before he could finish, starting to drain him of his spiritual power. Vincent began speaking through Selena's body, angrily asking Clean everything he knew and what he discovered regarding the Antigonids family ledger. All Clean could think about was his sister, feeling regretful that he would be the reason Melissa could never grow up. Just as he was about to lose hope, he heard Miss Justice performing her ritual, granting Clean the boost of power he desperately needed, and he freed himself from Selena's power. Vincent then got angry and decided to use his last card, tearing off his arm as a magical sacrifice in a desperate attempt to eliminate Clean, but it was too late. Clean used the rest of his strength to finish his spell, saving Selena and purifying her of the evil power. In the end, he succeeded in vanquishing the evil power with his bullet, severing the connection between Selena and Vincent, restoring Selena to her normal self. Clean vowed to himself never to involve his family in mysterious and unknown matters again. After that, we see Vincent trying to escape before his master could end his life, but his master appeared right before his door and crushed him like a fly. Later, Clean took Dan to the fortune-telling club, telling him that Vincent was the one who gifted Selena the mirror, so he might be part of the Aurora group. When they arrived, they found Vincent's corpse with his arm torn apart, and Clean confirmed that the spells matched those on Selena's mirror. Then Dan used his magical abilities to take a glimpse at the group's evil entity, confronting Dan face to face with a being entirely bound and having a single eye. Meanwhile, Miss Justice woke up in Lion on her birthday, with the servants bringing her clothes to prepare her, and once ready, she was very happy, celebrating with her dog Susie, who was the biggest shock to her when she learned he could now talk like humans due to drinking the potion. The events moved to the Zootland Theater, where there was a noisy party that everyone was enjoying. Then Klein appeared, and it seemed like he came to check on something at this private party of the group they were investigating. He didn't come for the party itself because he wasn't even paying attention when people started clapping for the singer. Behind her, the main character of the party appeared, and everyone began cheering for this person named Tress. Then Commander Dan showed up and asked Klein about Dolly. It turned out she had gone to accompany the Antigonus family records by order of the headquarters to transfer them to Bakelin city. It seemed Dan hadn't fully recovered yet from his injury in the last battle. He said he was lucky because, despite everything, he didn't get infected during that fight. Klein then started talking about the entity this organization venerates. It turned out to be an evil entity like the Twilight entity. Klein was sad and wished Vincent hadn't died in a dream because then they would have known more information and things would have been easier. Meanwhile, Trez was greeting the crowd before the curtain was drawn, and the focus shifted to the events of the Alfalfa tragedy. A girl came to Klein because he had started working as a spiritual expert and asked about her fiancé who was on the Alfalfa ship. Klein used his power, and it turned out the ship had sunk, but her fiancé managed to survive with difficulty. Dan had already been informed about this, but needed more information to continue the investigation. Then we see Trez greeting fans, and the girl who was with Klein and her fiancé appear. It turned out Trez had a hand in saving the man. After that, the girl introduced her fiancé to Klein, because he was the one who told her fiancé would return alive. Her fiancé greeted Klein, and Klein asked if anything was bothering him lately. Then they moved to Klein's room. Klein used the pendulum power on a man named Miller, who explained that since he survived, he's been having nightmares every night. The nightmare felt so real that Miller was terrified and tried not to sleep to avoid it. Klein tried to calm Miller and decided to see the nightmare for himself. He arrived at the ship where Miller had been, saw someone throwing a child into the sea, and tried to jump after them, but Miller saved him. In truth, Miller didn't want to save this rebellious man, but wanted to know what happened on the ship for everyone to be so violent and commit these crimes. Klein explained it might be clear now why the nightmare keeps repeating. Maybe it's trying to make you discover the truth. It seems like you noticed something but didn't fully see it. Then Klein noticed someone standing at the top of the ship watching what was happening. It turned out to be Trez, who was responsible for everything. Suddenly, Klein was transported to a strange place. He started hearing the word Hornices again, and a strange eye appeared, followed by what looked like a throne for a king or emperor. Klein woke up angry because the word Hornices was haunting him. He wondered if it belonged to some entity or was related to his transfer to this world. Then Dan arrived, and Klein told him that Trez was responsible for the ship tragedy. Dan was shocked, but knew Klein was telling the truth. However, that wouldn't be enough to catch Trez, because he was now seen as a hero for saving some people from the ship. They needed to investigate and find solid evidence, and Dan said he would do whatever it takes. Next, we see Trez sleeping when someone comes to him. Trez draws his weapon, but it seems to be a woman who knows him well. She starts talking, saying it must be fun to be responsible for this tragedy, with the survivors and their families giving him gifts. Trez replies that convincing the Zoam to kill each other on the ship was fun, and thinks that's how he completed his preparations for the presentation. The woman tells him yes, but there's another mission he must accomplish in Tengen City. The person he was cooperating with attracted the attention of the Nighthawks, so he has to do this mission alone. She then gives him the mission fee and a description of the Sequence 7 dose called the Witch. Then we move to Klein, who was with Mr. Neil looking for amulets to give to his brothers, but Neil took them to a liquor store, which puzzled Klein. Neil told him to trust him. They arrived at a place with a strange wall. Neil knocked on it in a specific way, and the wall opened strangely to reveal an elevator. They took it down to a place called the Lower Tengen Market. Klein was impressed, and Neil explained that all kinds of products were available here for all kinds of people wizards, transcenders, and punished ones. Suddenly, Klein felt something strange and noticed a strange man approaching him. This man had a high spiritual awareness. The man told Klein he smelled mott from him. Then weird things started happening, and the man fell to the ground. Neil explained that the man was born that way and his nickname was the Beast, advising Klein not to pay attention to him. They continued until they reached their destination for the amulets. Klein used his power and saw that the amulets were very weak. Neil told him they were not transcenders, so they couldn't make real amulets. Klein bought some incomplete amulets to improve them himself, but he was sad because the amulets were incomplete and expensive. Neil tried to ease his mind. Klein noticed a strange stone, and the seller told him it was Emperor Rosiel's blade, carrying Sufi power that would help avoid disaster. But Klein was not convinced and was about to buy the talismans when he saw Trez and decided to follow him. During the chase, Neil noticed someone else was following Trez. Neil told Klein that person was a spy working for the Punishers. Trez noticed this, tried to escape, and the spy started shooting. Someone almost died, but Klein saved them. During the chase, Trez was very fast, but couldn't avoid everything and got shot in his arm, yet he kept running. Klein and Neil went to the rooftop to try to catch Trez, but met Commander Dan and two spies who had been killed by Trez. Before Trez escaped, Dan asked Klein to come with him because they needed him to find Trez. They got into a carriage, and Klein asked if they found any evidence confirming Trez's crime. Dan told him that the Punishers found something. Trez was connected to some murder cases in nearby cities, and he was a transcender with the title Instigator of Sequence 8, which was a path to killing. While using his power, Klein understood what was happening, because instigators stir up evil desires in people to make them provoke conflict. Klein reached Trez and began confronting him. Dan told Klein that instigators belonged to demon sects, and it seemed Trez had other goals in Tengen. Klein was surprised by Dan's words. Dan explained that demon sects were groups who pledged loyalty to eternal demons, mostly women. They arrived at the place where Trez was, and Dan noticed blood by the entrance. He told Klein to stay put and not enter with them. Klein stood outside, worried about Triss because her next dose for Sequence 7 was only for females. Then people started coming out of the building because of the Nighthawks team, and Klein's girl accidentally bumped into someone. She seemed suspicious, and Klein tried to help her, but she told him she was fine, just a little dizzy. Klein then used his power and seemed to notice something, but Dan cut him off and pointed out they hadn't found Triss. After these events, Triss disappeared without a trace. They put up a wanted poster and searched for days, but found nothing. Because of this, the operation was suspended, and things stayed quiet for a while. Klein was promoted to full-time worker, earning £6 a week, which made him really happy. He also spent his free time practicing his hobby as a fortune teller to properly process his doses. In the tarot group, the Hanged Man card's position shifted slightly toward the Fool after using the 3 honorary names. The amulets were also successfully completed. Klein's sister was surprised because she didn't believe the amulets were as cheap as Klein said. Klein continued his combat training and spiritual work and was very exhausted. Things were calm until the so-called day came. Leonard knocked on Klein's door to call him for a new mission. It seemed something suspicious was happening in the city of Tengen, as the death rate had increased 5-fold. Strangely, all the deaths appeared natural. So, the Nighthawks were assigned to investigate. The Nighthawks started gathering evidence as deaths continued tragically. One man even set the workplace on fire to get revenge on the employees. There was a common link among the dead. Most were sick or homeless, and almost all were already close to death. Klein felt sad for one woman and gave her daughter some money because her family's situation reminded him of his own. If it weren't for his brother's hard work, Klein wouldn't be where he was today. Klein used his ability to see what happened and found out a woman had touched the back of the deceased in a strange way right before her death. The Nighthawks team confirmed there was a young woman involved in most deaths. We see someone messing with dolls, and it looks like dark magic is involved. Dan was sure Triss was involved and suspected she was working with this woman. The satanic cult was mostly made up of women. Klein was thinking about something, and Leonard seemed to have figured it out too. Leonard asked Klein to share everything he knew, and Klein started explaining his theory. All the deceased, whether someone was responsible for their deaths or not, were already close to dying. Their lives were forcibly taken by someone, as if offered as sacrifices for summoning evil demons or performing a wide-reaching curse. This seemed to be the reason for the satanic cult in Tengen. Everyone agreed with the theory. Leonard got friendly with Klein, saying he was glad they reached a conclusion together and that they seemed to be the main heroes. Klein was surprised Leonard called himself a main hero and asked why. Leonard said everyone has their secrets, but as long as Klein didn't threaten the Nighthawks, he would remain his teammate. Then Dan confirmed this was a ritual for something bad, so they needed to find the place immediately. Leonard gave Klein an item belonging to one of the deceased to track it. Klein used his power until he reached the location, but was shocked. The team headed there, but Klein's power was interfered with, preventing him from seeing the place clearly or reaching it. They narrowed their search after considering the most likely next victim's location. They arrived, and Dan praised Klein's abilities. Then Dan explained they would use the nightmare power so Leonard and others could attack while they executed the plan. There was a girl in the house who felt something strange, but when she looked out the window, she saw nothing. She then took out a bottle and powder and performed a disappearance spell. She went out to explore and killed one of the Nighthawks members. When the member vanished, she realized she was in a nightmare. Leonard seized the chance and attacked, managing to hit the girl and throw her away. Dan was about to catch her, but she cast a replacement spell and escaped the nightmare, starting a real fight with the Nighthawks. Klein noticed the girl had left Dan's nightmare. Dan told Klein not to approach the house no matter what, and to retreat if he faced any danger. Klein was shocked that the Nighthawks from Sequence 8 couldn't defeat this girl. When Leonard hit her, it turned out she was using a body switch spell, turning her body into parts aimed at Leonard to kill him, but Dan intervened just in time. The girl was watching everything from behind the window. She left her room, went to the dolls, and began performing a demon summoning ritual. The situation became unstable and more dangerous. A violent battle broke out, and Dan seemed to be injured, but he freed himself and entered the house. Attacks targeted him, and then he saw the eternal demon attacking him. He unleashed his power, but unfortunately, this worsened his condition, causing him to cough up blood. The girl escaped outside and even wounded Leonard with a rose. Leonard tried chasing her but failed, We see the girl using the rose to curse Leonard with dark magic. Leonard tore his hair from his head, clasped his hands, and cast a spell to survive. The girl thought she had killed Leonard, but he survived. Klein used his power to see the girl and remembered she was the one who had fallen in front of him when they were chasing Triss. What surprised Klein was that the girl looked a lot like Triss. Leonard then said this girl was Triss, surprising the rest of the team and leading them to ask why Triss was disguised as a woman. Klein explained that Triss had turned into a woman, not disguised, which explained his disappearance. Dan was shocked, but the conclusion made sense, since all members of this cult were women. The biggest shock was Dan learning that all the women in the cult were actually high-ranking men who had transformed into women. Then we see Triss boarding a train with everyone staring because now he was a beautiful woman. When he decided to light his cigarette, many men appeared wanting to help him. We see someone drawing a painting on the wall with their blood, and as soon as they start drawing that painting, something begins to happen, and this person transforms into a strange creature. Then Klein, Dan, and Fry go to Lamud Castle because Elizabeth had come to visit Klein some time ago and told him that since her return from Lamud City, she had been suffering from nightmares, and in her dreams, Klein saw a huge castle and also saw a ghost in the form of a knight. For this reason, he came with his companions to investigate this matter. Fry looks at the castle and tells everyone that there's a ghostly shadow above the castle, and to deal with that shadow, they brought a third-grade sealed artifact called the Silent Sacred Sun Emblem, which can destroy any spiritual creature within a 15-meter range in 1 minute, and also drives Beyonders insane if someone stands within its range for 6 hours. At this time, they only have 28 hours left, so they need to hurry. Then they begin investigating the castle. As soon as they enter the castle, Klein uses his power, and black smoke appears before them, but then a sword emerges from the smoke and attacks them, but they dodge it, and the sword flies back to the night ghost. Klein then uses a lament charm to calm the ghost, but it breaks free from that trap very quickly and begins attacking everyone. For this reason, Dan asks Fry to find its weakness. The knight then attacks Dan and strikes him away, and the sealed artifact falls from him. Then Fry finds the ghost's weakness, which is the glove on its hand, but they couldn't attack its weak point. Because of this, Klein starts moving toward the sealed artifact to pick it up, but the knight comes and attacks Klein. Klein then realizes he doesn't feel any pain because this is just a dream. Then Dan attacks the knight afterward, and Dan uses the sealed artifact, Mutated Sacred Sun Shroud, on the knight, which completely destroys it, and nothing remains of it except its glove, which Dan took. Fry then feels something is wrong and tells the captain that this ghost was very powerful, and it couldn't have this strength unless it had been here for centuries. This castle is very old, and this ghost wasn't connected to it. So this ghost definitely arrived recently. Then Klein finds a 1,000-year-old picture belonging to the castle's owner who disappeared from it. Then Klein finds that his face looks exactly like his mentor Isaac, which makes him start thinking about Isaac, and he suspected that his mentor was an evil character, but he dismisses this thought. After that, they decide to investigate the place for some additional time to make sure everything is alright, so Dan asks everyone to take guard shifts every 2 hours, and after giving the sealed artifact to Klein, Dan goes to rest a bit with Fry. Klein then looks at the sealed artifact and says to himself, this sealed artifact works well against spiritual monsters, and it's mentioned in the files that this artifact belongs to Intis and is connected to the sun pathway. But no one knows about its origin or where it came from. But if I examine it with the gray fog, I might be able to learn more about it. Klein then takes the artifact and goes with it to the gray fog, then used his power and began searching for the artifact's origin, and reaches the place where that artifact was born, where there was a person carrying the artifact, and golden liquid begins entering the artifact. Then something strange happens, and the person who was carrying the artifact disappears, which Klein didn't understand anything about, but he noticed the golden substance. So he recalled the events and approached a point of the golden substance. And after Klein touched that thing, he went to a strange place where there was nothing but flames until he saw the sun come directly in front of him, and he and his body began burning. He and everything around him, but the gray fog comes and saves him, and he began wondering, did the divination take me directly to the sun? I burned completely, and if the gray fog hadn't helped me, I would have burned until I became ash. I must perform divination carefully next time, or I'll be in great danger. But Klein's wounds suddenly heal completely, and he begins seeing different sequences from the sun pathway, and because he suffered from the sun's flame for 1 minute, he gets a reward, which is the potion formula for the 4th sequence of the sun pathway, which shocked him because it's a higher sequence, and he receives a warning not to look at this flame in this way again. Klein becomes very happy because of what happened and says he should repeat this again to benefit more, and with the help of the gray fog, he fixes everything and returns outside before they discover his matter. Fortunately, nothing strange happened and Klein decided not to take such risks again. After that, they return because they finished their mission, and Dan tells Klein that he should rest because he performed well. Then Klein receives a message telling him that Isaac has information about Hornaces, and Klein goes to meet him. But Klein was thinking about that picture in that castle, and he wonders to himself if Isaac had any connection to the matter. Then he goes to Isaac's room afterward, where Isaac isn't present. But Klein sees a painting made of blood on the wall, which belongs to the same castle they came from after the investigation, which frightens Klein. Isaac then arrives and tells Klein that he had been having strange dreams, and when he wakes up, he sees that he has actually drawn the painting. Then Isaac asks Klein to come see him, and Isaac then gives Klein a book about Hornaces, and Klein takes it and wanted to leave, but Isaac asked him to read the book there because the book belongs to the university and Klein can't take it outside. Then Isaac asks Klein to sit and calm down because he seems tense. Then Klein begins reading the book and sees the same palace he saw in his dreams, and learns that the Hornaces mountain range in the center of the northern continent separates the kingdom of Loan and the Republic of Intis, and that there was an ancient nation there many years ago. This makes Klein believe that the nation in the book might be the Eternal Night Nation, mentioned in the Antigonus family notebook. Klein then begins reading about the people of that nation, who believe that death is not the end and that they protect those who die from darkness. For this reason, they preserve the dead person. Then Isaac tells Klein that he also reached this part and was also amazed because there are no graves or corpses of people as if they never existed, and this ancient civilization worshipped a mysterious entity they called the ruler of Eternal Night. When Klein hears about Eternal Night, he begins believing that the Eternal Night Nation might be connected somehow to their Eternal Night Church. Then Isaac asks why Klein didn't drink his coffee, so Klein drinks it, but it's bitter, so he puts more than one sugar cube, which makes Isaac tell him you always took one cube. So Klein tells him he changed his taste, but it seems Isaac suspects Klein because he told him that he had been studying a new science recently, and because of this he was able to see fluctuations in Klein's life recently. And he told him that because of this, Klein might be in danger, but he couldn't learn much about it. Then Isaac said, I'm completely certain of one thing, that your fate points to me that you entered this castle, because when you saw it you were afraid, and after that you were afraid after seeing me too. This means you know some secret about me. Klein was stunned, but Isaac told him, don't be afraid. I just want to know something about my own past. Klein decided to go to the castle and was very nervous. He brought Isaac with him, as their predictions revealed that taking him there would be safe. In fact, Isaac would save him once as long as he didn't reveal his secrets to the Nighthawks. Isaac was surprised because the castle in his dreams wasn't as destroyed as this, and he remembered what he had seen in his dreams. When they reached the castle and Isaac entered through its ancient gate, he suddenly stopped and told Klein that he had seen this place in his dreams before, and there was always a child playing with a huge sword in its courtyards. When Klein heard this, he realized that the ghost they had killed might be Isaac's son. Isaac began exploring the castle until he found the old knight's sword. As soon as he picked it up, strong winds blew and the place began to return to its original state. At that moment, Klein saw Isaac's dreams and memories. He saw the child playing with the sword in the same place, but suddenly Isaac's health deteriorated slightly, ending the vision. Klein went to check on Isaac, but a secret passage suddenly opened in the wall with a foul smell coming from it. Klein and Isaac entered through the dark corridor. The scene was horrifying, and they continued until they reached an ancient tomb. When Klein saw it, he realized someone had tampered with it. Isaac opened the tomb with trembling hands, and inside they found the ghost body that the Nighthawks had previously destroyed. When Isaac saw his son's body, his anger flared and he lashed out at Klein. All the spirits in the castle began to gather in that room. Klein wondered in confusion why there were so many spirits since they had completely purified the place, and it seemed all these spirits were now following Isaac. Klein suddenly shifted to a vision from the past, where he saw soldiers gathering dead bodies and preparing to burn them. But suddenly the soldiers began to flee because Isaac's dead body came back to life from the middle of the flames, shocking Klein. An old woman prophesied that this type of magic would bring suffering, catastrophe, and death to everyone. Afterward, soldiers fiercely attacked Isaac, who raised his sword and began killing them one after another with superhuman strength without mercy. But there were many soldiers who started to overpower Isaac with their large numbers. When they almost killed him, a huge skeleton appeared to help him. This was the monster Isaac had contracted with, because Isaac held the second sequence of the death pathway. Then Isaac, along with the skeleton, killed all the soldiers and continued to win his successive battles with courage, becoming a leader of soldiers, earning him the title of Baron of Lemur City. Isaac then began spending time with his family, but after some time, because of his curse, his army became dead and his wife was also near death. Klein didn't understand what was happening. Then the child came and tried to talk to his father Isaac, but Isaac couldn't control himself and accidentally attacked his son, throwing him away. Because of this, Isaac decided to leave his son and wife and go away so as not to harm them. He began walking in the forest, abandoning everything. His son tried to call out to him, but Isaac continued on his way. After that, we see Klein trying to wake Isaac up until he succeeded and things calmed down. Klein looked at the ghost's body but found that its skull was missing. Isaac then realized his son's head had been missing for 3 months and was angry, deciding whoever stole his son's head would die a very painful death. Isaac began trying to find his son's skull by using his blood, which directly affected Klein, making him unable to understand anything. After that, they reached a different place with a huge door, and as soon as the door was opened, many skulls came out. Isaac was looking for his son's head but couldn't find it. Here, Klein again noticed the invisible feather. Isaac was talking to Klein, telling him he felt the same thing that would change his fate. Then they went to bury Isaac's son's body. Isaac buried his son's body with his own hands. Then Klein asked him if he remembered his life now, but Isaac said no. Only some fragments of memories returned now, but he didn't remember anything real, because every few decades he falls into a deep sleep, and when he wakes up, he doesn't remember anything, but he knows his truth because he still has his name, basic knowledge, and identity documents. And then I dreamed as if I had lived many lives and excelled in all of them in the end, and now I remember that wasn't a dream, but reality. Maybe it's because I'm connected to death, and perhaps my loneliness is the curse of a long life. Then Isaac looked at Klein and thanked him for restoring his memories and said, "You don't know how it feels to have no past. It's like a ship at sea with no destination, but I've finally found my way." Klein began to feel that he was somehow like Isaac, and said to himself, "I am also alone in this world." But when he got home, Klein remembered that he now had Benson and Melissa, even if he wasn't the real Klein. But he still wanted to spend happy moments with them so he could create beautiful memories, because in the end, he would leave this world.